This is Kenny. He's a co-founder of Manta Network. So let's have a very interesting discussion. So Kenny, can you describe what do you do in a few words? Like, I met you first time, so please tell me.
Myself or what Manta does?
I mean, what do you do as a co-founder? I think maybe about the project.
Sure.
First. We'll talk about yourself a little bit later.
So Manta, we are the first and largest modular L2. We actually have been building for the past 4 years with a team of around 55 people all across the world. You know, we are one of the most active L2s in the space right now as well. I think we're probably in the top 3, top 4 with about 1 million transactions per day going across these 200 different ecosystem applications. And our focus is purely on user experience, what can drive up scalability, what can increase security, what can reduce costs. And we've been making a lot of strides on that front, and happy to chat more about that.
I get it. Can you explain me what does it mean modular?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So let me take a step back. If you look at the history of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, right? Like back in 2011, you have Bitcoin and all these forks emerging from Bitcoin, like Bytecoin and Digibyte and Ravencoin, and in the future more like, Bitcoin Cash and stuff. All these teams take this existing technology and they say, we're gonna make it better. And they do it all in-house by themselves. And they build everything from scratch, apart from obviously forking Bitcoin, but everything else from scratch, right? But then when you fast forward to 2024, none of them are really as relevant as Bitcoin anymore. Right? In fact, many of them are irrelevant, period. And so these teams, they weren't able to adapt. They built everything in-house. They weren't able to adapt to the changing needs of the users, right? Same thing with Ethereum. Ethereum comes out and then you see forks of Ethereum and competitors to Ethereum, EOS, Neo, Qtum, all these other things. Everyone's building everything in-house. And they're saying, we're gonna be better than Ethereum. But fast forward to now, many of them have fallen out of relevance, right? And so now in 2024, we have a same exact issue, but with layer 2s, right? There's like probably 100 different layer 2s that you and I can collectively name together. And will all of them still be around in 5 years, 10 years? I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. We agree on that. And so what we're seeing is this recurring pattern of people building all their core technologies in-house, being very slow to adapt and not being able to address the changing needs of users. And as a result, they fall out of relevance. Instead of building everything in-house, now we're in a space, we've evolved to a point where we can take advantage the technologies that other services are building out. And that's exactly what Modularity does. So instead of building everything in-house, we say, oh, this team has an amazing data availability service that we can take advantage of today. This team has an amazing ZK prover network that we can take advantage of today. And we can integrate that into our network so that we can continue to provide value on an ongoing basis to our users. 3 years from now, when there's a new product, a new service, a new technology out, if that provides value to the users, we can take advantage of that, plug it into the network, and give it directly to the users as value add to them and their experience on Manta. And I think that modularity is future-proofing the infrastructure development and allowing teams to compete through agility and adaptability rather than just building something that's cool today but may not be cool in 5 years. So that's how I see sort of what modularity is and the advantages that it brings.
What was your hardest decision as a co-founder during these 4 years?
Oh my God, so many hard decisions. I feel like every single week there's a hard decision.
Maybe some of the top, some of the hardest. Because entrepreneurship is about the decision making. Because me personally, I'm not a blogger. I do all this blog as a hobby. So this started as a hobby and this is continued as a hobby. And I also have around 70 people in the different teams. And I know how hard it sometimes to solve all of these problems.
For myself personally, I think it's very hard for me as an individual to let go of people. And this comes in the form of team members, this comes in the form of partnerships, because I see a lot of potential in everything and everyone. And so I feel like there's always opportunity, but it may not necessarily always be the case. And if you hold on to that sort of thinking, then it can be impacted negatively on the project. Because when we started Manta, we're actually fully focused on just building out ZK. for on-chain cryptography. And so our initial team was all just cryptographers. And we were in the Polkadot ecosystem. And then one day we had to make the hard decision to pivot also into becoming an Ethereum L2, because the reality is there weren't enough users in the Polkadot ecosystem. There still aren't enough users in the Polkadot ecosystem. And so despite how much we build, if no one uses it, does that mean that we've built something successful? Have we served a purpose? And I think the answer to that is no. Personally, I love the Polkadot ecosystem. I love the people there. I love the relationships I've built, right? And it was truly a hard decision to, leave that ecosystem in order to focus on a new one, because you don't want to leave your friends, right? And so any sort of decision when it comes to impacting relationships is always very hard for me.
I get it. I agree with you. This is so hard. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself? How do you come up to an idea to create this Manta Network? What is your background and how all this happens?
I've always been a technology entrepreneur. I started my first company back in 2011 in the cloud computing space. And so I think you can also say I'm a fairly early adopter in technologies. Back when I started cloud computing, this was also during a time when people said, cloud computing's never gonna make it, because real enterprises, real businesses use bare metal, physical on-prem servers, and only developers who are trying to play with things use cloud. But now we go and we look at the world and we can't find a business that scales that doesn't use cloud, right? And it's really interesting to see that sort of transition. And I see something similar in crypto. And then from there, I built consumer apps as well, just to test out the waters. Consumer apps didn't really go as well as the cloud computing company. Went to go pursue my master's degree at MIT. Shortly after that, while at MIT, I was working in the AI field. And this is before like AGI and ChatGPT and stuff. But back then, AI was really focused on image recognition and detection. And so I worked a lot on like facial detection, object detection, disease detection. So being able to look at images, X-rays and MRIs and be able to detect diseases such as cancer earlier, more accurately and faster than human doctors could. All throughout this whole journey, I've been in the crypto space. Back in 2013 is when I started mining Bitcoin, just to kind of experiment with it using cloud servers and stuff. So learned a lot about cryptocurrency and blockchain there, and dabbled in it and tried to find if there was any sort of recipes for success between AI and blockchain as well. But this was back in like 2019, before the AI blockchain hype really came into fruition. After that, right, like just being in the space, I've always seen a lot of problems with user experience and adoption and scalability. And so that's kind of what prompted myself and my co-founder to start Manta. We actually met in graduate school. I was at MIT, he was at Harvard. And so we're basically neighbors. And so we collaborated a lot and started Manta right after.
I was always looking for the MIT, but maybe did not think about it in serious. Can you share maybe one of your most exciting insights that you get from MIT?
At the time, the most interesting insight that I had was MIT students and the community was very bearish on crypto and blockchain, whereas Stanford and the West Coast was very bullish on blockchain. And I think that that sentiment is still kind of there, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, because that means that a lot of the innovation goes towards the West Coast. And I wish that it would happen more at my alma mater. But at the same time, right, like I think that the mentality, right, like is a little bit different as well. I think the East Coast schools are very much focused on research and also kind of not so much on the entrepreneurship and risk-taking side as the West Coast.
What does entrepreneurship really is for you?
What does entrepreneurship mean for me? That's a really good question. When I started my first company, my mentor, who's still, a really close friend to this day, told me that you can't control what happens to a company, because you can work your hardest, you can do everything right, and everything can still fall apart in front of your face. But you can control the experience that you give people during that entire journey. And so entrepreneurship, right, like many people are very much focused on purely the outcome, but people don't appreciate the experience enough. And so you can still give people a good time, regardless of how the outcome is. And so for me, entrepreneurship is really about trying to impact people as much as I can.